1980 science fiction has all of those elements that make greatness in cinema and storytelling.
It changed everything, and I loved it.
We felt so creative, and we were so loose.
Wow, what a great concept.
It's the positiveness that made for repeat viewing.
It's timeless. Knocked me out.
Surpasses our brains and goes straight to our hearts.
I have done it. I have done it again. I've watched another 4.5-hour documentary. But this time it's on In Search of Tomorrow. Now, In Search of Tomorrow, it's done by David Weiner and Robin Block, who also did In Search of Darkness, which, you know, if you don't know, I help fund those two. Now 3 of them. I'm working on 3. But they've now come in and said, all right, let's do a sci-fi documentary. And I'm just going to say this right off the bat. If you're a huge fan of sci-fi films, and especially 80s sci-fi films, watch this. Watch this documentary. That's it. With this documentary, the obvious difference between this and Darkness is the genre. And what I like about this documentary is that there are some movies like like The Thing or some of those movies that they've already talked about in the Darkness documentaries, and they kind of leave them alone here, which I like that, because it's like, all right, because if you want to hear about this movie, you watch this documentary, so you can go back and forth between them. I like that. But some movies in here that they didn't talk about, I got a little bit, not really irritated, more just like upset. Like them not talking about Big Trouble in Little China. And I was like, really? You're not going to do one of my favorite movies? But then I found out a couple days ago, prior to recording this review, that they're doing a second one. And that's coming next summer, I think is what they said. So yeah, once more information comes out about that, I'm definitely getting it. Because if you can't tell, I really loved this documentary. And because, me loving a lot of 80s films, and also growing up with watching not necessarily a whole lot of 80s horror films that mainly came later in my childhood. I mainly watched like Ghostbusters and then Big Trouble in Little China, or like those sci-fi films, and to see them get talked about here, I'm just like, oh, this is like at home for me. And that's the cool thing, is that they talk about, obviously, talk about the big ones. They talk about Star Trek. They talk about Star Wars. They talk about the big ones. But they also talk about like little smaller films that you probably don't know about, like Alien Nation, or Earth Girls Have It Easy, or Aren't Easy, or even Heartbeeps. And it's like, what? You guys are talking about these? Like, okay, cool. But obviously my favorite one they talked about was Ghostbusters. And the fact that they got Ivan Reitman before he passed away, just seeing him talk about Ghostbusters, I had tears in my eyes. And then at the end of the movie, when the credits are rolling and they have In Loving Memory of Him, I was just losing it. Because Ghostbusters, if you don't know about me, is my favorite film of all time. And it's such a personal film to me, because it's the film that made me realize I like film and I want to learn more about film. I want to watch more films. I want to study film. So yeah, seeing Ghostbusters get talked about was just, that was awesome. And it was all mainly stuff I already knew about because I'm such a big fan of the movie. But yeah, it was the fact that they got Ivan Reitman to be interviewed. I loved that. And every time when he talked about a movie, like whether it be Ghostbusters, or they even talked about Heavy Metal, which was quite cool. Yeah, and him talking about like, yeah, it's it's this, but we wanted to do this. But it was still really cool, still really fascinating. So I really like how, with going back to Darkness, how when they have like a director that's mainly known for this movie, they also talk about other movies they do. Like with, for example, in Darkness, they talk about with John Carpenter. And of course, they talk about The Thing, they talk about They Live. But they also talk about like Christine. Or they talk about Prince of Darkness. Or they talk about Halloween 2. They talk about Halloween 3. And I'm like, okay, cool. They're actually getting, this, more, they're talking about more work from a specific director or even actor. And I really like that. I like how they don't show favoritism. It's just like, we love everything they do. So we're going to talk about everything. We're not just going to talk about one little thing. We're going to talk about everything. Which is one of the reasons why I decided to back them, because seeing something like this, it's like, okay, this is a documentary where it's talking about everything. It's not focused on one, because if it was just focused on one, you don't need it to be called In Search of Tomorrow or In Search of Darkness. Just have a documentary just solely on this one film or this one series. And they gather them all. And the fact they're doing a second one really excites me. And yeah, sci-fi is a genre that I love, because with horror, it can go anywhere. You can set it in the past, you can set it in the future, you can set it in the present. But it's such a huge genre, and there's so much you can do. Like, for example, Aliens. Not the movie, but just the word aliens. Your imagination can go flying with however many ways you want it to go. It can be like Alienation, where it's like, what if we lived with humans? What would that be like? And they were like contributing with society like humans. Or Aliens, where it's, a group of Marines fight against killing or aliens that kill. Or E.T., a lovable alien that just wants to get home. It's like your imagination can just go wild. So sci-fi, a lot like horror, it can give you can think of one word and come up with 100, even thousands, maybe even millions of ideas that can go with just that one topic. And it's also something where, you watch. My favorite thing to do is watch like 80s horror films or watch 80s sci-fi films, and then just go like, we have that today. Like, go back and watch RoboCop, and they have the trackers. You have your phones can track. You have self-flying cars. We don't have that yet. Hoverboards, they call them hoverboards, but they're not really hoverboards. 19 Jaws movies, we don't have those. But it's one of those things where you kind of watch in the past and you think, like, when we hit this year, like even when I watched Back to the Future Part 2, I saw it before 2015. I was thinking like, the future is going to look like this. And then 2015 showed up, like, nope. Or even something like Blade Runner, where it's set in 2019. And I'm just like, okay, in about a year, the future will look like this. And then it never happened. And it's like, okay. So, oh well. Who knows? Maybe it's still 2022, and technically the first Purge started in 2022, so there's still 2 months left of the year, so let's see what happens. But it's just the concept of sci-fi, the fact that you can think of just one topic, whether it be aliens or robots or anything like that, and come up with 100 different ideas to that one topic, and just let your imagination go wild. It's just, I love that. And that's also why I love watching these 80s films. It's because it's just, it was kind of the decade where, you know, you can come up with whatever you wanted and just do it, which is also why, you know, I want to learn more about how these films were made, why they made these films. And I love watching these kind of documentaries. So if you love 80s sci-fi films, just watch this. It's 4.5 hours, but it's so engaging that it just sucks you in. So just watch it. There you go. It's rating amazing. So just watch it. And I'm very excited that they announced that part 2 is coming, because there's some films that they didn't talk about here that I just was like, I'm quite upset that they didn't talk about it. So I'm really hoping they talk about it in part 2. So I think they said next summer. So once it comes available for pre-order, you bet I'm pre-ordering that.
The audience was ready for it. The world was ready for it.
And we all wish we could be back there in some way, doing that with those people at that time.
That's one of the joys of cinema.
That's the magic of sci-fi, man.